She flew to Florida to kill her ex's new girlfriend, the Sakiyna Thompson story. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. It started with a message, a short, bitter text that would change 3 lives forever. Enjoy her while you can. The message came from Sakiyna Thompson, a 31-year-old woman from New York who had just discovered that her ex-boyfriend, the man she thought she'd spend forever with, had moved on. Not just moved on, but had fallen in love again. Her ex's new girlfriend was 23-year-old Kayla Hodgson. Bright, kind, full of life. Kayla worked at a small salon in Florida and often posted smiling pictures of herself and her new boyfriend. She had no idea someone hundreds of miles away was watching, and growing colder inside with every photo. Sakiyna wasn't just heartbroken. She was unraveling. For months, she and her ex had argued over messages, over calls, over social media posts. She begged him to come back. He didn't. He blocked her. That block was the spark. Something inside her snapped. She began talking to friends about how he used her, how she couldn't stand seeing him with someone else. At first, her friends brushed it off as heartbreak. But the tone changed quickly. She wasn't crying anymore. She was plotting. She looked up flights to Florida. She searched Kayla's address. She printed photos of her ex's new girlfriend, smiling, happy, alive, and stared at them in silence. Then one night, she said it out loud. "I'm going to see her myself." On a humid morning in 2021, Sakiyna packed a small black bag. Inside, she placed only the essentials: clothes, makeup, her phone, and something else she never told anyone about. At 8:47 a.m., she boarded a flight out of LaGuardia Airport in New York City. The destination, Florida. As the plane lifted off the ground, passengers scrolled through movies, listened to music, or slept against the windows. But not her. Sakiyna stared straight ahead. Her mind wasn't in the clouds. It was in the storm brewing in her chest. The captain's voice crackled over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard." She didn't hear the rest. All she could hear was his voice, the voice of the man she once loved, telling her, "It's over." Back in Florida, Kayla Hodgson woke up early that same morning. She made coffee for her boyfriend, laughed about something he said, and got ready for work. She didn't know that someone was already on her way down there. Someone who blamed her for every tear, every sleepless night, every broken piece of a failed love. Kayla was known for being gentle. She didn't argue online. She didn't post drama. She was private, sweet, the kind of person people described as peaceful. She had no enemies. At least she thought so. By mid-afternoon, Sakiyna's flight landed. She didn't check into a hotel under her own name. Instead, she rented a car and began driving straight to the city where her ex and Kayla lived. Her phone buzzed constantly. Her sister was calling. A friend was texting. She ignored them all. Her focus was locked. She was calm, too calm. The drive stretched for hours. Sunlight turned to orange. Orange turned to black. She kept driving. Every mile brought her closer to the home where Kayla and her ex were building a new life. What makes a person decide that love must end in death? For weeks before the flight, people close to Sakiyna noticed something different about her. Her social media posts turned darker. She wrote cryptic captions about betrayal, revenge, and heartbreak. She once posted a quote that read, "If I can't have you, no one will." It wasn't a joke. It was a warning. When investigators would later go through her online activity, they'd find dozens of searches for her ex's address, his workplace, and Kayla's profile. She wasn't healing. She was hunting. It was late, close to midnight, when she finally reached the neighborhood. Quiet, peaceful. Palm trees swayed gently in the warm Florida breeze. But inside Sakiyna's car, the air felt suffocating. She parked down the street. She waited. She watched. The house lights flickered off one by one. The couple inside had no idea they were being observed by someone sitting in the dark, gripping the steering wheel hard enough for her knuckles to turn white. Hours passed. Finally, Sakiyna stepped out. Every motion was deliberate, quiet, controlled. When she knocked, Kayla didn't hesitate to answer. It was late, yes, but Florida nights are often filled with neighbors, deliveries, people coming and going. Kayla opened the door, confused but polite. The woman on her porch looked exhausted, angry, unfamiliar. "Can I help you?" Kayla asked. What happened next is still not fully clear. Some say they argued. Others believe Kayla tried to calm her down. But in the chaos that followed, one thing became certain. A confrontation turned fatal. Neighbors later said they heard screaming, a loud bang, then silence. When police arrived, they found Kayla's body near the entrance of her home. The scene was chilling. There were signs of a struggle. A single item, a small bloodstain, would later become the key to everything. The suspect had fled. The car was gone. But inside, that drop of blood remained. It wasn't Kayla's. It belonged to someone else. Someone who had been close enough to touch her. News of the murder spread fast. Kayla's family was shattered. Her mother said, she didn't deserve this. She was just living her life. Meanwhile, Sakiyna vanished. She turned off her phone, ditched her rental car. She thought she could outrun it. But evidence doesn't disappear. It only waits. Detectives combed through the home. Every inch of it told a story, of a fight, of fear, of someone desperate to silence the past. They collected fingerprints, footprints, and that tiny, almost invisible blood droplet. It was sent to the lab. Days passed, then weeks. While police waited for results, they began piecing together her movements. Surveillance footage from the airport, car rental records, security cameras near the home. Each clip built the picture clearer. A woman boarded a flight from New York. She landed in Florida. She rented a car. And hours later, Kayla was dead. The man both women loved, Kayla's boyfriend and Sakiyna's ex, was devastated. He cooperated with police, crying through interviews. He never imagined his past would destroy his present. As police tracked Sakiyna's digital footprint, they discovered she had fled the state. But she made a mistake. She used her debit card to buy gas. That single swipe gave investigators the lead they needed. Within days, the FBI joined the case. And what started as a local homicide turned into a nationwide manhunt. When they finally found her, she was hiding at a friend's house. Her hair was cut short. Her phone was broken. But it was over. She didn't resist arrest. In fact, she barely spoke. Officers later said she sat in silence, staring down at her hands, almost detached from reality. When they asked her why she did it, she said only one thing. He moved on too fast. That bloodstain found at the crime scene? It matched her DNA. That was the final piece. The drop that solved it all. Placed her inside the home. It told the story her silence wouldn't. And when prosecutors presented it in court, the jury didn't take long. Guilty. At 31 years old, Sakiyna Thompson was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Kayla's family wept quietly. Sakiyna didn't cry. She didn't even look up. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she knew from the moment she boarded that plane, her life was already over. Now, years later, the story still echoes online. The blood told the story first. A single drop smaller than a coin. It was almost invisible. But under the harsh white light of a crime lab, it glowed like truth. That droplet didn't belong to Kayla Hodgson. It belonged to the woman who had stood in her doorway hours before her death. Sakiyna Thompson. The morning after Kayla's death, the Florida sun rose warm and calm over the neighborhood. Birds sang. Lawns glistened. But one house was surrounded by yellow tape and flashing blue lights. Detectives from the county sheriff's office moved quietly through the home. They took photos of every room, every stain, every mark that hinted at a struggle. The smell of bleach hung in the air, faint but deliberate. Whoever had done this had tried to clean up. But killers forget one thing: blood never lies. Crime scene technicians found smears that were wiped but not erased. On the doorknob, the tile, and just near the entryway, that single droplet. They didn't know whose it was yet, but they would soon. Detective Daniel Morgan, a 20-year veteran of the department, stood in the living room that morning. looking around quietly. He had worked hundreds of homicides, but something about this one was different. This wasn't random. This wasn't robbery. This was personal. He looked at the photos on the mantle, Kayla smiling with her boyfriend. That's when he noticed something else. A photo missing from one of the frames. "Where's this one?" he asked one of the techs, pointing at an empty spot. The technician shrugged. "No clue. Maybe fell off." But Morgan didn't buy it. He'd seen jealous rage before. He'd seen the kind of anger that doesn't come from strangers. He turned to his team. "Find the boyfriend." When detectives brought in Kayla's boyfriend, he was in shock. His hands trembled as he spoke. He couldn't stop crying. They sat him down in the small, cold interview room. A microphone recorded everything. "Tell us about Kayla," Detective Morgan began. He took a deep breath. "She was everything to me." Then came the question that changed the tone of the room. "Do you know anyone who'd want to hurt her?" First, he said no. But then his eyes fell to the floor. There was someone. He told detectives about his ex, Sakiyna Thompson. They had broken up months earlier, but it hadn't gone smoothly. "She wouldn't let go," he said softly. "She kept calling, messaging, showing up at my work." He had blocked her. She made new accounts. When he started dating Kayla, that's when the messages turned dark. Detective Morgan asked, "Did she ever threaten Kayla?" He nodded. "She said she'd come find her." Detectives subpoenaed phone records, social media accounts, and airline logs. Within 48 hours, the trail began to unfold like a map of obsession. Search history. Flights from New York to Florida. Where does Kayla Hodgson live? How to track someone by phone number. On her phone, investigators found screenshots of Kayla's Instagram posts. Photos of Kayla holding hands with her ex captions circled. Comments highlighted. Every bit of it screamed fixation. Security footage from LaGuardia Airport showed her walking briskly through the terminal. Black hoodie, dark jeans, eyes forward, no smile, no hesitation. Another camera caught her checking in at the gate. Then boarding pass scan. Florida. Detectives slowed down the footage frame by frame. It was unmistakable. Sakiyna Thompson had flown to Florida one day before Kayla was killed. The pieces were falling into place. Next, they checked local car rental agencies. And there it was, a receipt under her name. Pickup time. 3:17 p.m. return. Never. Detective Morgan muttered. She didn't even bother to hide it. When they tracked the car's license plate, they found surveillance footage of it driving into Kayla's neighborhood hours before the murder. And then, hours after, speeding away in the opposite direction. The timeline was airtight. Now, they just needed to find her. By now, her name had been added to a multi-state alert. Detectives in New York were notified. Her family was contacted. Her mother cried on the phone, telling officers she hadn't heard from her daughter since she left for what she said was a weekend trip. Days passed. The media caught wind of it. Headlines read, "New York woman wanted in Florida murder of her ex's girlfriend." The pressure was on. A week later, a deputy spotted a familiar vehicle parked outside a small apartment in Georgia. The same rental car that was missing. They surrounded the building quietly, knocked, waited. When the door opened, Sakiyna stood there. Her hair was shorter. Her eyes were blank. She didn't resist. As they cuffed her, she said nothing. Not a single word. The interrogation room was cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed above her. A camera blinked red in the corner. Detective Morgan sat across from her, file in hand, voice steady. "Sakiyna," he began, "we know you were in Florida. We know you saw Kayla." Silence. He opened a folder and slid a photo across the table, the one of Kayla. "Why did you go there?" Her eyes stayed down. He tried again. Was it to talk to her? To make peace? She finally looked up. Her voice was barely a whisper. "She took everything from me." At first, she denied everything. But then, Detective Morgan mentioned something, that drop of blood. Her eyes flickered. It was small, but he saw it. "We found your DNA inside the house," he said. "That means you were there." She inhaled sharply, then exhaled, trembling. Tears welled up. and then it spilled out. "She answered the door," she said softly. "She looked at me like I was crazy." Morgan leaned in. "What happened next?" "I told her he was mine," she whispered. "She said I needed help." Her voice broke. She laughed. "I didn't mean to." She said the argument turned physical fast. Kayla tried to push her away. Sakiyna grabbed something. She didn't even remember what, she claimed. And in that blur of jealousy and rage, everything ended. She remembered screaming. She remembered blood. Then silence. When it was over, she panicked. She ran, left the weapon behind. She tried to clean, tried to erase it, but blood always tells. Months later, the courtroom was full. Kayla's family sat in one row, Sakiyna's in another. Two families, one tragedy. Prosecutors laid out the evidence, the flight, the car, the texts, the DNA. It was a story of obsession, jealousy, and control. The defense tried to argue temporary insanity, but the jury saw through it. They saw intent. They saw planning. They saw a woman who boarded a plane with murder on her mind. After deliberating for only 2 hours, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty. The judge's voice echoed through the room. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Kayla's mother clutched a photo of her daughter and whispered through tears, "Justice." But there's no real justice in a story like this, because nothing can bring Kayla back. Sakiyna sat silent as the guards led her away. No tears, no apologies, just emptiness. In the weeks after the sentencing, Kayla's story went viral. People across the country shared her photo, her smile, her story. She became a symbol of how jealousy can twist love into something deadly. Her ex-boyfriend never spoke publicly again. He deleted his social media, moved away. He was haunted by what happened, by the two women he once loved, and how one destroyed the other. Detective Morgan still remembers the case. When asked what stood out most, he said, "She planned it all. But what she didn't plan for was the truth. That truth was in the smallest detail." For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It was 6 a.m. when the alarm buzzed in Sakiyna Thompson's New York apartment. The sun hadn't yet risen. Her room was dim, silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the alarm that kept ringing. She turned it off and sat still. For a long moment, she didn't move. Her eyes were open, staring at the wall across from her bed. On that wall, taped at eye level, was a picture of her ex-boyfriend, Marcus, and his new girlfriend, Kayla Hodgson. They looked happy, too happy, and that happiness burned inside her chest like fire. Sakiyna whispered to herself, "She took my life. She took everything." That morning, she'd already made up her mind. She wasn't going to cry anymore. She wasn't going to beg Marcus to take her back. She wasn't going to scroll through their old photos or replay old voice notes. No, this time she had a plan. And that plan started with a one-way ticket to Florida. For weeks, Sakiyna had been spiraling. Her family noticed it. Her best friend, Tanya, noticed it. But no one truly understood the depth of her obsession. She had been in love with Marcus for years. He was charming, successful, and handsome. Their relationship had its ups and downs, but Sakiyna was addicted to the way he made her feel. Like she mattered. Like she was special. But when Marcus ended things, he didn't just walk away. He moved on, quickly, with Kayla. Kayla Hodgson was 23 years old, a nursing student, kind, soft-spoken, the type of person everyone described as sweet. She had no idea that falling in love with Marcus would eventually cost her life. In the weeks after the breakup, Sakiyna's social media posts grew darker. Cryptic quotes, song lyrics about betrayal, photos of her crying, and then silence. She deleted everything. No posts, no selfies, no trace of emotion, because she wasn't posting anymore. She was planning. She checked flight prices. She looked up Kayla's address in Palm Beach County. She even scrolled through Kayla's Facebook comments to see who she hung out with, what time she worked, where she liked to go. Every click, every scroll, it was building something inside her. A storm. On February 5, 2022, Sakiyna packed her small black suitcase. She filled it with clothes, toiletries, and something else. Something she'd never tell anyone about. A knife. She wrapped it in a towel, tucked it under a pile of folded shirts, and zipped the bag shut. Then she put on her gray hoodie, slipped on her sneakers, and called a rideshare to the airport. It was cold that morning. The driver made small talk, but Sakiyna barely responded. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her nails digging into her skin. Inside her head, it was chaos. What if he's there when I get there? What if she doesn't answer the door? What if I can't go through with it? But another voice, the darker one, whispered, "She stole your life. You have to make it right." When she arrived at JFK Airport, she moved through security like a ghost. Head down, earbuds in, no emotion. Cameras later showed her walking calmly through the terminal, holding her phone. Her boarding pass read, West Palm Beach, Florida. A direct flight, 3 hours and 20 minutes. On the plane, she stared out the window as the clouds drifted below. The other passengers watched movies, napped, laughed quietly. But Sakiyna sat motionless. Her thoughts played in loops. Memories of her and Marcus. That one Valentine's Day when he brought her roses. That time they went to Miami together, the same city she was now flying toward. She remembered how he said, "You're my everything," and she believed him, until Kayla came along. The Florida air hit her the moment she stepped off the plane. Warm, sticky, alive. But inside her, everything felt cold. She rented a car, a silver Hyundai, and drove to a cheap hotel about 20 minutes from Kayla's apartment. The woman at the front desk smiled and asked, "Visiting family?" Sakiyna forced a small grin. "Yeah, something like that." That night, she didn't sleep. She sat on the bed, scrolling through Kayla's Instagram again. There were photos of Kayla and Marcus. On the beach, smiling, his arm wrapped around her waist. In one post, Kayla had written, "You showed me what love really feels like." Red heart. That caption broke something in Sakiyna. She slammed her phone on the bed and covered her face with her hands. Her breathing grew heavy. Then she stood up and started pacing. She grabbed her suitcase, unzipped it, and pulled out the knife wrapped in the towel. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror. Tired eyes, trembling hands, anger she couldn't contain anymore. "She doesn't deserve him," she whispered. "He was mine first." At 7:15 the next morning, Sakiyna left the hotel. The Florida sun had just started to rise. The sky glowed orange and pink. But there was no beauty in it for her, just purpose. She had looked up Kayla's address on Google Maps the night before. It was a quiet neighborhood, palm trees, clean sidewalks, children's bikes lying on lawns. She drove slowly, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Every stoplight felt like a test. Every turn, a decision she could still back away from. But she didn't. The voice inside her kept repeating, "She deserves this. She took everything from you." When she finally turned into Kayla's street, her heart started pounding. She parked a few houses away, cut the engine, and sat there. For a long moment, she just watched the building, waiting, thinking, breathing heavily, and then movement. The door opened. Kayla stepped outside, smiling, holding her phone, probably texting Marcus good morning. That image, that innocent, everyday moment, sent a surge of rage through Sakiyna's veins. What happened next was quick, almost too quick for anyone to stop. Sakiyna got out of the car. She walked straight toward Kayla. Neighbors later said they heard shouting, 2 women yelling, 1 crying. Kayla didn't understand what was happening. She didn't even recognize her at first, until she heard her name. "Kayla!" She turned and saw the woman coming at her. There was a flash of silver, a scream, and then silence. Moments later, a neighbor ran outside and saw Kayla lying on the ground, blood pooling beneath her, her phone just inches from her hand. Sakiyna was gone. She'd fled the scene before police arrived. Speeding through the Florida streets, breathing hard, hands shaking. Her mind raced with one thought, it's done. Kayla Hodgson was pronounced dead at the hospital. She was 23 years old. She had dreams of becoming a nurse, traveling the world, starting a family. Those dreams ended in one act of jealousy. Detectives quickly connected the dots. Witnesses described the car. Surveillance cameras caught Sakiyna leaving her hotel. Airport footage confirmed she'd flown from New York just days earlier. An interstate manhunt began. And by the next morning, she was in custody. Caught. But here's what shocked investigators most. When she was questioned, Sakiyna didn't cry. She didn't deny it. She didn't ask for a lawyer right away. She just said, calmly, "She took my life. Now I took hers." It was as if, in her mind, this was justice, balance, closure. But to the rest of the world, it was tragedy. Kayla's friends flooded social media with tributes. Photos, memories, heartbroken posts. Marcus disappeared from the public eye. And the woman who had once been full of love now faced a lifetime behind bars. All because she couldn't let go. The courtroom was silent. Not a whisper, not a cough. Just the steady hum of the air conditioner and the faint creak of the wooden benches. Sakiyna Thompson sat at the defense table, wearing an orange jumpsuit. Her wrists were cuffed, her face calm, expressionless. In front of her sat the judge, the jury, and a courtroom filled with people who wanted answers. How could a 31-year-old woman, intelligent, educated, once described by friends as sweet and caring, commit something so brutal? How could love turn into this? The trial of State of Florida versus Sakiyna Thompson began in early 2023. By then, the story had already spread across the country. The media called it the jealous flight murder. Reporters gathered outside the courthouse. Every headline painted a similar picture. A woman so consumed by rage and heartbreak, she boarded a plane to kill her ex's new love. Prosecutors called it premeditated, cold, and calculated. The defense called it a moment of emotional breakdown. But the facts told their own story. Investigators presented a timeline that left no room for doubt. They had airport surveillance footage showing Sakiyna boarding her flight from New York to Florida. Receipts from her car rental, hotel records with her name, and, most haunting of all, cell phone data that placed her at Kayla's apartment complex at the exact time of the attack. Then came the messages, thousands of them, text messages and DMs between Sakiyna and her ex-boyfriend, Marcus, that painted a portrait of obsession. In one message, just weeks before the murder, she wrote, "You think she's better than me? She's not. I'll prove it." In another, "You ruined me, Marcus. You don't get to walk away happy." The jury listened as the prosecutor read those words out loud. Each one hung in the air like a ghost. You could feel the tension tighten across the room. The prosecutor, a seasoned attorney named Carla Reyes, stood in front of the jury, her voice firm. "Ladies and gentlemen, this was not an act of passion. This was an act of revenge." She paused, letting the silence stretch. The defendant didn't just snap. She planned. She searched for flight prices. She researched the victim's address. She bought a knife. She flew across the country. Every single step deliberate, thought out, controlled. The jury watched her intently. Carla continued, "This was not love. It was control. And when she lost that control, she decided no one else could have him." She pointed toward the defense table, where Sakiyna sat staring straight ahead, unblinking. That woman right there decided that Kayla Hodgson didn't deserve to live. And she made sure of it. When it was the defense's turn, Attorney Daniel Moss walked slowly to the center of the courtroom. He didn't argue the facts. He didn't deny what happened. Instead, he tried to explain why. "This is not about a monster," he said quietly. "This is about a broken woman. A woman who loved too deeply, who was abandoned, humiliated, and spiraled into a mental breakdown." He described Sakiyna as someone who had battled depression and anxiety for years. He talked about how Marcus had emotionally manipulated her, promising commitment one week, disappearing the next. "She wasn't thinking clearly," Moss said. "She acted out of heartbreak, not hatred." He asked the jury to see her as human, not evil, not calculating, just lost. Then came the hardest part. The witnesses, Kayla's mother, Linda Hodgson, took the stand. Her hands trembled as she unfolded a small piece of paper. Her voice broke with every word. "Kayla was my only daughter," she said softly. "She was kind. She wanted to help people. She called me every day just to check in." She paused. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I don't understand how anyone could hate her enough to do this." The jury wiped their eyes. Even the judge looked down, visibly moved. Then came Marcus. He looked uncomfortable, almost haunted, as he sat before the court. He admitted to dating both women at different times, and yes, he confirmed that the relationship with Sakiyna had ended months before she came to Florida. When asked about her behavior, he hesitated. She didn't take it well," he said quietly. "She would text a lot, call a lot. She said she couldn't live without me." The prosecutor leaned forward. "Did she ever threaten anyone?" He swallowed hard. "Yes, she said if I ever loved someone else, she'd make me regret it." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. During the trial, a forensic psychologist was called to testify. She had spent hours interviewing Sakiyna after her arrest. Her findings were chilling. The psychologist described a pattern of obsessive attachment, a mental state where emotional dependence becomes so intense that the person's entire identity revolves around another individual. When that attachment is threatened or lost, she explained, it can trigger overwhelming rage, panic, and irrational thinking. The individual feels as if their very existence is being erased. The jury listened silently. Some scribbled notes. Others stared at Sakiyna, as if trying to reconcile the calm woman in front of them with the violent act she'd committed. One of the most emotional moments came when prosecutors played bodycam footage from the day of Sakiyna's arrest. In the video, she sat in the back of the police car, her wrists cuffed. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She was whispering to herself. "She took him from me. She took everything." Those 6 words hit the courtroom like a thunderclap, because in them you could hear the truth. Not legal truth, not psychological truth, emotional truth. This wasn't about logic. It was about a woman who couldn't stand to lose. After weeks of testimony, the jury left to deliberate. Hours passed. Reporters waited outside, cameras ready. Inside, tension hung like fog. Finally, the door opened. The jury filed back in. Everyone stood. The foreperson handed the verdict to the judge. He read it aloud. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Sakiyna Thompson, guilty of first-degree murder." A gasp echoed through the room. Kayla's mother wept silently. Marcus lowered his head. Sakiyna didn't flinch. She just sat there, eyes forward, lips pressed tightly together, as if the words didn't even register. When it came time for sentencing, the judge looked directly at her. His voice was low, steady, but heavy with disappointment. "Ms. Thompson, you had every opportunity to walk away. You had every chance to rebuild your life. Instead, you chose vengeance." He paused. "You didn't just destroy one life. You destroyed many." Then he delivered the sentence. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. Final, unforgiving. In prison, Sakiyna reportedly kept to herself. No visitors, no letters, no phone calls. According to guards, she spent most of her days reading or sitting quietly by the window. Some said she still talks to herself. Others said she writes in a small notebook every night, though no one knows what's inside. Maybe guilt, maybe regret, maybe denial. Whatever it is, she carries it alone now. Kayla's family created a foundation in her memory, the Kayla Hodgson Fund for Victims of Domestic Violence and Obsessional Crimes. It helps families recognize early signs of stalking, jealousy, and emotional manipulation before things turn deadly. "We want people to understand," her mother said, "that obsession isn't love, it's control, and control kills." Those words have been replayed in news reports, documentaries, and podcasts ever since. The echoes of the gavel faded long ago, but the story didn't end there. Not for Kayla Hodgson's family, not for Marcus, not even for Sakiyna Thompson, who now wakes up each morning behind concrete walls and steel doors. The courtroom lights dimmed. The reporters moved on. But for those left behind, the silence afterward was deafening. This is what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. The first night Sakiyna spent in the Florida Women's Correctional Facility was eerily quiet. The guards said she didn't cry, didn't ask for anything, didn't speak. She sat on the edge of her bed for hours, staring at the wall, as if replaying something over and over inside her head. Her intake file described her as calm but detached. When asked by a prison counselor if she felt remorse, she whispered, "I don't know what I feel anymore." She was placed in general population but kept mostly to herself. No fights, no drama, just a woman drifting through her days like a ghost. The nation couldn't look away. The story spread across social media, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook. People debated endlessly in the comments. Some called her evil. Others said she was broken. A few even called her a warning sign for anyone who confuses obsession with love. True crime podcasts dissected her motives. TV shows replayed her interrogation footage. And across the internet, the phrase "the jealous flight murder" became a haunting headline. But beneath the noise, one message kept echoing. Love can't justify violence. For the Hodgsons, time didn't heal anything. Every morning, Kayla's mother, Linda, still brewed 2 cups of coffee, one for herself and one for her daughter. She said it made the house feel less empty. On what would have been Kayla's 25th birthday, friends gathered at a park in Orlando. They lit candles, shared stories, and wore t-shirts that read, "Love shouldn't kill." Linda stood before the crowd, holding a framed picture of her daughter. Her voice cracked as she said, "If you ever think you can't live without someone, please talk to someone. Don't let your heart become a weapon." The crowd fell silent. Some cried. Others bowed their heads, because it wasn't just a mother's plea. It was a warning to anyone listening. Marcus disappeared from public life after the trial. He deleted his social media accounts, moved to another state, and rarely spoke to reporters. But one local journalist managed to find him months later. He agreed to speak off camera on one condition, that his last name not be used. He said, "I live with guilt every single day. I introduced those two. I let it spiral. I thought it was just jealousy. I didn't think it would end like this." He paused. "You can't imagine what it's like knowing someone died because of a relationship you started. It's a kind of punishment that never ends." Marcus eventually got engaged to someone else. But even now, people close to him say he carries that story like a shadow, something he can't outrun, no matter how far he moves. Years passed, and life inside prison became a slow rhythm for Sakiyna. She worked in the kitchen, read romance novels, attended counseling sessions once a week. But there was one thing she refused to do: talk about Kayla. Counselors said she avoided the topic completely. When asked directly, she would change the subject or simply go quiet. Until one day during a session, she finally spoke. The counselor asked her, "Why did you go to Florida?" She stared at the floor. "Because I thought he still loved me," she said. "I thought if she wasn't there, things would go back to the way they were." The counselor wrote that down, then asked, "And now?" Sakiyna looked up. "Now I know it was never about love. It was about control. I just didn't want to be the one left behind." It was the first sign of self-awareness she'd ever shown. A small crack in the wall she'd built around herself. A few months later, the Hodgson family received a letter. The handwriting was neat, careful. The return address, Florida Women's Correctional Facility. Inside was a single page. "To the family of Kayla Hodgson, I know there are no words that can undo what I did. I can't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I think of her every day. I am sorry. St." Kayla's mother never responded, but she kept the letter in a drawer. When asked why, she said quietly, "It's proof that she remembers. And maybe that's enough." Out of tragedy, something unexpected grew. The Kayla Hodgson Foundation began to partner with schools and women's shelters across Florida. They held seminars called Love versus Obsession. They taught young people how to spot early signs of possessive behavior, isolation, constant checking in. threats of self-harm if you leave, extreme jealousy. Each session ended with Kayla's story, her smiling face projected on the screen. A life lost because someone couldn't let go. One counselor said, "If even one person sees themselves in this story and walks away before it's too late, then Kayla didn't die in vain." Years later, clips of the case began circulating again. But this time on TikTok and YouTube, creators analyzed her mindset. True crime fans debated whether she was evil or mentally ill. Hashtags like #Sakiyna Thompson and #JealousFlightMurder started trending. Some users even found her old photos, smiling, posing with friends, and compared them to her mugshot. The contrast was haunting, because in her eyes you could see it, that thin line between love and madness. And people couldn't stop watching, couldn't stop commenting, couldn't stop asking one question: what pushes a person to that point? Experts later used Sakiyna's case in lectures and studies. They described her condition as erotomanic fixation with narcissistic rage. In plain terms, she built her entire identity around someone who didn't love her back. And when that illusion shattered, she broke too. Dr. Helen Rivera, a criminal psychologist, said it best: "Obsession is a slow erosion of the self. When love becomes ownership, empathy disappears. That's when people become dangerous, not because they hate, but because they can't handle being powerless." Her words echoed what everyone feared, that the next Sakiyna could be anyone: a friend, coworker, a neighbor, someone smiling on the outside, falling apart on the inside. Inside her prison cell, years blurred together. Birthdays, holidays, seasons, they all passed without meaning. Inmates came and went, but Sakiyna stayed. She had no visitors listed, no mail, no calls. The only person who reached out was a journalist writing a book on crimes of passion. When he asked to interview her, she agreed on one condition: "You don't make me sound like a monster, just a mistake that never stopped growing." During their conversation, she said something that haunted him. "You ever love someone so much, you forget who you are without them? That's what happened to me. By the time I realized it, I was gone." The journalist later wrote, "Her words chilled me because they weren't violent. They were human." 10 years after the murder, the prison allowed a documentary crew to film interviews about rehabilitation and remorse. When the cameras turned to Sakiyna, she looked older, her hair grayer, her eyes duller. When asked if she could go back, what would she change, she said softly, "Everything. I would have walked away. I would have chosen silence over pain." Then she looked directly at the camera and whispered, "Tell them, no one is worth your freedom." For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.